This woman had the audacity to show up at our family business demanding ownership papers for a company she'd never worked for. Then, when I questioned her authority, she produced forged power of attorney documents. But here's what she didn't know. I specialized in detecting exactly the kind of financial fraud she was attempting. The crisp sound of fake legal documents hitting my desk while her sickly sweet perfume burned my nostrils. A 34-year-old gold digger in designer morning clothes was trying to steal a business from grieving partners using fabricated paperwork. The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. What would you do if your deceased partner's stepmother tried to steal your life's work using forged documents, then threatened legal action when you said no? Because what happened next is every fraud victim's dream come true. I didn't just expose her lies. I completely destroyed her entire criminal operation. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from because this revenge story has everything. Forged documents, identity theft, public humiliation, and the sweetest justice you'll ever see. My name is Edmund Blackthorne, and 8 months ago, I thought I'd found stability. After 15 years building Pinnacle Financial Consulting with my business partner Robert Ashworth, we'd created something beautiful. Robert handled client relations while I managed forensic accounting, fraud detection, and the complex financial investigations that made us the region's most trusted consulting firm. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with spreadsheet precision filled our downtown office as we helped clients recover millions in embezzled funds. Robert had been more than a business partner. He was family, the brother I never had, with a brilliant mind for investments and a heart that trusted people too easily. That trusting nature had led him to marry Vivian Ashworth just 18 months before his sudden heart attack at age 42. A whirlwind romance with a woman 15 years younger who'd swept into his life during his messy divorce, promising love and partnership while eyeing his assets like a hawk circling prey. Enter Vivian Ashworth, age 34, grieving widow and self-appointed business inheritor. Picture every manipulative stepmother stereotype rolled into one perfectly calculated package. She drove a red BMW, wore black designer dresses that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and used tears like weapons to mask her deep-seated greed. The scent of expensive perfume announced her arrival before her stilettos clicked against our office floor. She marched into our conference room that Tuesday morning, leather briefcase armed and loaded with a stack of legal documents thicker than a law textbook. "Mr. Blackthorne," she said, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "We need to discuss the transition of Robert's business interests. I'm prepared to be generous with your severance package." I set down my forensic analysis report. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. I'm a 50% owner of this company. Robert and I built this together." Her smile was sharper than a paper cut. "Actually, when Robert restructured the business last year, he transferred controlling interest to me through a revised power of attorney. You're an employee, nothing more." I pulled out our original partnership agreement, the one I'd studied dozens of times since Robert's funeral. "This document shows equal ownership. I never agreed to any restructuring. The power of attorney supersedes previous agreements," she said like she'd memorized it from a legal manual. "Your emotional attachment to the past is understandable, but business is business. I'm prepared to offer you $75,000 to transition out smoothly." I tried staying reasonable. "Vivian, if Robert made changes, I'd need to see documentation. We were partners for 15 years. He would have discussed something this significant with me." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." She handed me a fancy legal notice printed on law firm letterhead. "You have 30 days to comply or I'll file suit for breach of fiduciary duty. I have connections in the legal community, Mr. Blackthorne. This can go easy or hard." That night, I spread all of Robert's business papers across my home office. Partnership agreements, tax records, corporate filings, and tucked between them something interesting. The power of attorney documents she'd presented had subtle inconsistencies in formatting and dating. Here's something every business owner should know. Original legal documents always have specific watermarks, notary seals, and filing numbers that can be verified with state records. Always request official copies before accepting any dramatic ownership claims. But I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole would go, or that Vivian's desperation had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with covering up the biggest identity theft scheme our state had ever seen. 2 days after I refused Vivian's demands, she escalated faster than I expected. I was reviewing client files when unfamiliar voices drifted across our reception area, the kind of authoritative tone that makes your stomach drop. 2 men in expensive suits stood by our reception desk, briefcases ready for battle. The taller one had the predatory smile of a collections attorney, while his partner kept tapping his pen like a nervous metronome. Both carried business cards from Morrison & Associates Legal Services, a firm I'd never heard of despite 15 years in financial consulting. Edmund Blackthorne, the tall one, announced, "We represent Mrs. Vivian Ashworth in matters concerning Pinnacle Financial Consulting. We're here to discuss your immediate resignation and transition." I studied their business cards closely. My forensic training had taught me to spot inconsistencies, and these weren't even subtle. The firm's address led to a mailbox store, and the phone numbers had area codes from 3 different states. "Can I see some official documentation of your representation?" I asked. They exchanged that look people give when they realize they're in over their heads. "These documents authorize immediate asset freezes and preliminary injunctions," the nervous one mumbled, avoiding eye contact like a teenager caught cheating. The paperwork looked professionally printed. I'll give them that. But real attorneys don't show up unannounced with ultimatums. And they definitely don't threaten asset freezes without court orders. "What court issued these injunctions?" I asked. "Superior Court for Commercial Disputes," the tall one said confidently. I memorized their business cards while they handed over their fake documents. 20 minutes later, I had the State Bar Association on the phone. "Hi, I just received legal documents from Morrison & Associates. Could you verify their licensing status?" "Sir," the clerk said slowly, "we have no record of a Morrison & Associates in our database. Who exactly served you these documents?" And there it was. Vivian had crossed the line from inheritance disputes into criminal impersonation of legal counsel. I remembered reading somewhere that impersonating attorneys carries serious jail time, usually 2 to 7 years, depending on the financial damages involved. This wasn't just a business dispute anymore. It was multiple felonies. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Detective Sarah Martinez at the Commercial Crimes Unit, spreading out photos of the fake legal documents and their business cards. "Let me run these addresses," she said, typing into her computer. "Well, that's interesting. All 3 addresses belong to mail forwarding services registered under false names. Detective, this is more serious than typical business disputes," I said. "People desperate enough to impersonate attorneys tend to escalate their fraud tactics. My late wife used to say I was paranoid about documentation, but 20 years of forensic accounting had taught me the value of being thorough. I spent the next morning creating a comprehensive evidence file. Digital copies of every business document, banking records, and email correspondence with Robert before his death. If someone was planning to steal our company, they'd have to get past a forensic accountant with very particular skills in document authentication. While I was organizing evidence, Vivian launched her emotional manipulation campaign. My phone started buzzing with calls from Robert's friends about how worried they were about my hostile behavior toward his grieving widow. "She's just trying to honor Robert's wishes, and you're making everything difficult," one mutual friend told me. Mrs. Henderson, our office manager for 10 years, stopped by that evening with some intel and a box of Robert's personal items she'd rescued from his desk. The smell of his favorite cologne still lingered on his business cards, reminding me of morning strategy sessions when we'd planned complex fraud investigations, never imagining I'd soon be conducting one involving my own business. "Edmund, honey, that woman's got some people twisted up," Mrs. Henderson said. "She's claiming Robert confided in her about wanting to simplify the business structure and reduce your role. But you know Robert better than anyone. He never made major decisions without discussing them with you first." I thanked her and made a decision. If Vivian wanted to play legal games, I'd give her a masterclass in evidence-based investigation. I gathered all our corporate documents, Robert's medical records from his final months, and the timeline of their relationship, then headed to our attorney like a prosecutor with a murder case. The law firm conference room was packed tighter than a courtroom when I walked in. Our corporate attorney, David Morrison, had invited 2 additional partners specializing in business fraud and estate disputes. "Edmund," David said, "before we dive into strategy, I need to share something troubling. I checked with the court clerk about those documents Vivian presented. No power of attorney was ever filed with Robert's estate proceedings." The room buzzed with legal significance. I could see the attorneys recognizing the implications. Maybe the grieving widow wasn't so innocent after all. "Edmund, I've been reviewing the timeline," said Patricia Wells, the estate specialist. "Vivian married Robert 18 months ago, but these power of attorney documents are dated just 6 months ago. That places them during Robert's final medical treatments, when he was heavily medicated and emotionally vulnerable." I pulled out the medical records Robert's doctor had provided. According to his physician, Robert was on pain medication that significantly impaired his decision-making capacity during the period these documents were allegedly signed. The fraud patterns were becoming clear. Vulnerable older man, whirlwind romance, legal documents signed during medical crisis, immediate attempt to seize assets after death. It was textbook predatory behavior disguised as grief. But David had uncovered something even more disturbing. "Edmund, I ran a background check on Vivian. She's been married 3 times in the past 8 years. 2 of her previous husbands died within 24 months of marriage, and both had their business assets restructured shortly before their deaths." The room fell silent as the implications hit home. This wasn't just about stealing our company. Vivian was potentially a serial predator who targeted successful older men, married them quickly, then positioned herself to inherit their wealth after conveniently timed deaths. "Are we talking about murder?" I asked. "We're talking about a pattern that needs investigation," Patricia said carefully. "But first, we need to protect your business from immediate seizure." That afternoon, we filed emergency motions to freeze any transfers of business assets and requested court-ordered authentication of all documents Vivian had presented. If she had legitimate claim to ownership, she'd have to prove it under oath with original documents subject to forensic analysis. While we waited for the court date, I did what I do best. I followed the money. Vivian's financial history read like a masterclass in fraud. Shell companies, mysterious cash deposits, insurance payouts from deceased husbands, and a pattern of debt accumulation followed by sudden windfalls through inheritance. My phone buzzed with a call from Detective Martinez. "Edmund, we've been digging into those fake attorneys who visited you. Turns out they're connected to a larger identity theft ring. And guess who's been providing them with information about potential targets?" The pieces were falling into place. Vivian hadn't just married Robert for his money. She'd connected him to a criminal network that specialized in elder fraud, document forgery, and asset theft. Our little accounting firm had become ground zero in a much larger criminal conspiracy. 3 days after our court filings, Vivian decided to play victim. A certified letter arrived at my office, thick, expensive paper with a grief counselor's letterhead that screamed, "Emotional manipulation." The psychological evaluation letter was a masterpiece of professional concern, claiming I was experiencing pathological grief and delusional attachment to deceased partners' business interests that required immediate intervention. I called the counselor's office immediately. "Dr. Sarah Williams, I received concerning correspondence about a psychological evaluation. Could you verify if this assessment was actually conducted?" "Sir," the receptionist said, "Dr. Williams never conducted any evaluation for a Mr. Blackthorne. This letterhead appears to be fraudulent." That confirmed another felony. Impersonating medical professionals to discredit business partners crossed multiple legal lines, including healthcare fraud and defamation through false medical claims. While I documented this latest attempt at character assassination, I discovered something that changed everything. Among Robert's personal files was a letter he'd written but never sent, dated 2 weeks before his death. The handwriting was shaky from medication, but the message was clear. "Edmund, I'm worried about Vivian's influence over my business decisions. If something happens to me, please investigate any documents she presents. I trust your forensic skills more than anyone's." Robert had suspected her manipulation before his death. He'd been trying to warn me about exactly what was happening now. My attorney called with news from the court authentication process. Edmund, the document examiner's report is devastating for Vivian's case. The power of attorney papers show clear signs of forgery. Different ink composition, altered dates, and forged notary seals. We're not just talking about business fraud anymore. This is criminal document forgery with intent to defraud. How extensive was the forgery? Commercial lease modifications, insurance beneficiary changes, banking authorization forms, probably $300,000 in fraudulent financial activity. But here's the smoking gun. The notary whose seal appears on these documents died 2 years before Robert allegedly signed them. That night, Vivian filed a harassment complaint with the police, claiming I'd been stalking her and making threatening phone calls. When Officer Johnson showed up at my door, his body language suggested he'd heard similar accusations before. "Mr. Blackthorne, I'll be straight with you. We've had multiple complaints about inheritance fraud in this area. Document everything and avoid direct confrontation when possible." As he was walking back to his patrol car, Johnson stopped and turned around. "Oh, one more thing. That psychological evaluation letter your suspect sent? Same format as 3 other cases we're investigating. Might want to check if other victims received similar documentation." I spent that evening creating a comprehensive fraud timeline across my home office table, studying every financial transaction and legal document with forensic precision. The sound of papers rustling filled the quiet house as I built an airtight case that would expose Vivian's entire criminal operation. And slowly, a much bigger picture started coming into focus. This wasn't just about stealing one business. Vivian was part of a sophisticated network targeting successful professionals through marriage, forged documents, and systematic asset theft. For days after my harassment complaint, Vivian decided to play lawyer again. A certified letter arrived at my office, thick, expensive paper with a law firm's letterhead that screamed, $500 an hour, and we want you to know it. The cease and desist letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, demanding I stop interfering with lawful estate administration, stop spreading defamatory statements about her character, and my personal favorite, pay damages for tortious interference with inheritance rights. I called the law firm directly to verify representation. "Whitmore and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "I'm calling to confirm your representation of Vivian Ashworth in estate matters." "Sir, we have no record of representing anyone by that name. Could you provide more details?" Another forged legal document. Vivian was either remarkably stupid or remarkably desperate, continuing to impersonate legal counsel even after being caught once. That advice from Detective Martinez stuck with me as I researched forensic document examiners. Robert always said I was too thorough, but losing him taught me that life's too short to let criminals steal what you've worked for. I hired the state's top document authentication specialist. $500 felt steep, but Robert used to say, "Buy truth, even if it costs you." While I waited for the expert analysis, I found something that would flip this entire situation upside down. The forensic examination revealed not just forged signatures, but evidence of systematic document manipulation dating back to shortly after Robert's marriage. "Mr. Blackthorne," the examiner called me on a Wednesday morning, "you need to see this. The signature analysis shows at least 15 different documents with forged signatures spanning 12 months. Insurance policies, banking authorizations, business contracts. This wasn't opportunistic fraud. This was a systematic campaign to gradually transfer assets before your partner's death." My heart started pounding as he showed me the evidence. "Are you saying she was planning this while Robert was still alive?" "According to our analysis and the document dating, yes, sir. She began forging his signature within 6 months of marriage and escalated as his health declined." I spent that evening comparing the authentication report with Robert's medical records and our business correspondence. The more I studied the timeline, the clearer it became. Vivian hadn't just stolen from a dead man. She'd been systematically defrauding him for over a year while masquerading as a loving wife. But she wasn't done escalating. The next morning, I caught her red-handed in our office after hours, rifling through our client files like she owned the place. The click of her heels on our marble floor announced her presence before I even saw the light under the door. "These client records are now my property," she announced like she was reading from a script. "I'm conducting due diligence before assuming full business operations." "Ma'am, those files contain confidential financial information. You need to leave immediately." "I don't think so." She pulled out her phone and started photographing client documents. "I'm documenting assets for transfer to new management." 20 minutes later, she was back with what appeared to be a sheriff's deputy, though something felt off about his uniform and badge. "This is a civil asset seizure," the fake deputy told me. "Stand aside while we secure business property." I called the sheriff's department immediately. "Someone claiming to be your deputy is attempting to seize my business property. Can you verify?" "Sir, we have no deputies in your area on civil asset seizure. That's not even a real legal procedure. File a complaint immediately and document everything." That afternoon, I installed security cameras throughout our office and created backup copies of all essential documents. If Vivian wanted to play criminal, I'd make sure every illegal action was recorded and preserved. My attorney called with updates from the court authentication hearing. "Edmund, the judge reviewed the forensic evidence and issued some interesting rulings. All of Vivian's documents are confirmed forgeries. Her power of attorney is void, and she's been ordered to show cause why she shouldn't be held in contempt for submitting false evidence." "How substantial were the damages?" "Commercial document forgery, attempted theft of business assets, impersonation of legal counsel. Could be $200,000 to $400,000 in damages. Maybe more if we can prove ongoing criminal enterprise." That night, Vivian filed another police report claiming I'd threatened her during our office encounter. When Detective Martinez showed up, the same officer who'd taken my original complaint, she looked genuinely frustrated. "Mr. Blackthorne, she's claiming you said you'd make her regret stealing from Robert. Did you say that?" I told her she'd regret not understanding federal laws about confidential financial records and client privacy violations. Martinez nodded and closed her notebook. "Thought so. Between you and me, we've gotten 4 similar complaints about document forgery in estate cases this month. Your evidence is helping us build a pattern of organized fraud." As she was leaving, Martinez added something that made my pulse quicken. "Your forensic analysis is going to be interesting. The DA's office is asking questions about serial marriage fraud and potential homicide investigations." I pulled out the authentication results that night, studying them under my office's bright fluorescent lights. The smell of fresh coffee and determination filled the air as I realized I held something more powerful than any legal document. Mathematical proof that Vivian was a career criminal who'd been systematically defrauding vulnerable men for years. But what I didn't know yet was just how deep her criminal network ran, or how many other victims existed across multiple states. The identity theft, the forged medical records, the network of accomplices posing as attorneys and law enforcement, all of that was still hidden beneath layers of fake paperwork and emotional manipulation. All I knew was that tomorrow I'd start using this evidence like a loaded weapon in a war between justice and organized crime. I was finally ready to win. The systematic harassment started exactly 1 week after the court ruled Vivian's documents were forged. I arrived at our office to find all the locks changed and a notice posted claiming the building was under private security assessment due to threats against property owners. But here's where Vivian made her first major mistake. She didn't know about my relationship with the building's actual owner, Charles Morrison, who'd been our landlord for 10 years and knew our lease was current through the following year. The smell of fresh paint hit me when I called Charles about the lockout. "Edmund, nobody authorized any security assessments," he said angrily. "Someone changed my locks without permission. That's breaking and entering. I'm calling the police immediately." The responding officer was Detective Martinez, who'd been tracking our case. "Mr. Blackthorne, we've got surveillance footage from the building's security cameras," she said, uploading video files to her laptop. 3:30 a.m. this morning, and there she is. The timestamp showed Vivian directing 2 men in coveralls as they changed the locks and posted fake security notices. Clear evidence of criminal trespassing and interference with business operations. I called my insurance company next. "Jim, Remember those discussions about business interruption coverage? We've got a situation. The adjuster who came out was experienced with fraud cases. Mr. Blackthorne, we've handled 6 similar business interference claims in your area over the past year. All involved estate disputes where widows attempted to seize business assets through intimidation. Insurance investigators are starting to recognize patterns. You think this is organized? I think someone's running a harassment campaign hoping victims will settle rather than fight. Keep those security files safe. We might need them for criminal prosecution, not just insurance claims. While I dealt with the lockout, Vivian was busy orchestrating what she called an emergency stakeholder meeting. Social media notifications started flying about concerns regarding unstable business partners and financial irregularities at Pinnacle Financial Consulting. Mrs. Henderson contacted me that evening with disturbing intelligence. The scent of worry mixed with her usual professionalism as she shared what she'd learned from other office managers in our building. Edmund, that woman held a meeting at the business center yesterday afternoon. She's got some of Robert's former clients convinced you've been mismanaging their accounts and might be stealing from client funds. Did she show any evidence? Honey, since when do fraudsters need evidence? She had professional-looking charts about account irregularities and photocopies of bank statements. Made it sound like you're embezzling client money. I spent the evening reviewing every client account we managed, knowing that Vivian's accusations would crumble under scrutiny. Something kept nagging at me about her confidence in making financial accusations against a forensic accountant. So I decided to dig deeper into her own financial history. The forensic analysis revealed something stunning. Vivian's bank records showed suspicious patterns dating back 5 years. Large cash deposits following each husband's death, followed by immediate transfers to offshore accounts, then mysterious reinvestment in new identities for approaching her next victim. My research session was interrupted by a call from the State Bureau of Investigation. Mr. Blackthorne, this is Agent Williams with the Financial Crimes Unit. We understand you've been investigating document forgery in connection with business theft. That's correct. I filed complaints about forged power of attorney documents. We'd like to talk with you tomorrow. Your case fits a pattern we've been tracking across multiple states. Can you come in around 10? The next morning brought another surprise. Our business bank accounts were frozen due to suspicious activity reports filed by someone claiming to represent concerned stakeholders. According to the bank, I had outstanding fraud investigations that required immediate account restrictions. Sir, the bank manager explained, we received documentation suggesting potential embezzlement and money laundering. Someone filed complaints about irregular client fund transfers. I pulled up our account statements on my laptop. I can explain every transaction. Someone's filing false complaints to sabotage our business operations. It took 6 hours and multiple attorneys to restore account access. But the pattern was becoming crystal clear. Vivian wasn't just trying to steal our company. She was attempting to destroy it through systematic financial sabotage. At the Financial Crimes Unit office, Agent Williams spread out a file that could have filled a small library. Mr. Blackthorne, your document forgery complaint started something bigger. We've been investigating a multi-state fraud ring specializing in marriage-based asset theft. What kind of pattern? Organized targeting of successful older professionals, rapid marriages, forged legal documents, then systematic asset transfer before or immediately after the husband's death. Your evidence fits cases we're tracking in 7 states. The agent showed me photos and documentation from 12 other cases. All featured similar patterns. Whirlwind romances, suspicious deaths or health crises, forged financial documents, and widows who disappeared with significant assets shortly after probate proceedings. The good news is you're not alone, Agent Williams continued. The bad news is this appears to be organized crime masquerading as grief counseling. We're talking about a network that's stolen an estimated $2.8 million over 5 years. That afternoon, I got a call from James Patterson, Robert's estate attorney. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd discovered something devastating. Edmund, I need to discuss something confidential. Not about taking sides in your business dispute, just some irregularities I found in Robert's final medical records. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from offices and potential surveillance. James looked like he hadn't slept in days, constantly checking over his shoulder while he talked. I've been reviewing Robert's medical file, and there are some concerning discrepancies, he said quietly. Medication dosages that don't match his prescriptions, appointment records that his doctor never made, and blood work results that suggest he was receiving drugs not prescribed by his physician. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Edmund, I think Robert might have been systematically poisoned during his final months. The medical records inside told a story of deliberate health sabotage, unexplained weakness, cognitive impairment, and organ stress consistent with slow-acting toxins, all beginning shortly after his marriage to Vivian. James, why are you showing me this? Because I've seen this pattern before. 3 other clients whose young wives became widows under suspicious circumstances. I was afraid to speak up, but your evidence of financial fraud gave me courage to investigate the medical angle. He paused, stirring his coffee nervously. Edmund, you don't just have a business theft case. You're sitting on evidence that could expose serial murder disguised as natural death. Driving home that evening, I realized this had grown beyond a simple inheritance dispute. Vivian wasn't just a gold digger who'd forged documents. She was potentially a serial killer who'd murdered her way through multiple marriages, using sophisticated fraud to cover her tracks. The sound of gravel crunching under my tires felt different as I pulled into my driveway. This wasn't just about saving my business anymore. It was about justice for Robert and potentially several other victims who'd trusted the wrong woman with their lives. Tomorrow I would start building a case that could put a serial killer in prison for life. The forensic accountant had become something much more important. The key witness in what might be the biggest murder conspiracy our state had ever seen. The evidence boxes from Robert's estate covered my entire dining room table like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Agent Williams sat across from me, her investigative experience evident as she organized financial records that told a story of systematic murder spanning 8 years. Edmund, this is bigger than we initially thought, she said, flipping through bank statements from Vivian's previous marriages. 7 deceased husbands, nearly $3.2 million in inherited assets, and a pattern of mysterious health crises that preceded every death. But the real bombshell came when we traced the medical timeline across all victims. Agent Williams had coordinated with medical examiners from 4 states, and the pattern was undeniable. Let me get this straight, I said, feeling my blood pressure rise. All 7 husbands experienced similar health declines, all were prescribed medications by the same traveling physician, and all died within 18 months of marriage. It gets worse. Look at these insurance policies. Williams spread out death benefit documents across Robert's old chess table. Each husband had their life insurance increased dramatically within months of marriage, with Vivian as the primary beneficiary. We're talking about $400,000 to $800,000 payouts per victim. The sound of pages turning mixed with my growing fury as the scope of Vivian's murder spree became clear. This wasn't just about inheritance fraud. She'd created an elaborate killing machine using poison, forged documents, and fake medical care to murder wealthy men for insurance money. Here's the smoking gun, Williams continued, pointing to a series of medical records. The physician signing all these prescriptions, Dr. Marcus Webb, doesn't exist. The medical license number belongs to a doctor who died 6 years ago. I walked to my kitchen window and stared out at the city lights, thinking about Robert's final months of confusion and weakness. That wasn't natural aging or stress. That was systematic poisoning by someone he trusted completely. Agent Williams, if we can prove this pattern, what are we looking at for charges? 7 counts of premeditated murder, multiple counts of insurance fraud, document forgery, identity theft, organized criminal enterprise. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at life without parole or potentially the death penalty. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Martinez. Coroner wants to meet. Robert's autopsy results raise questions. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The meeting at the medical examiner's office felt like stepping into a criminal investigation television show. Dr. Patricia Harrison had toxicology reports, tissue samples, and forensic evidence spread across a laboratory table that looked like something from a crime scene. "Mr. Blackthorne, we've been reviewing your partner's autopsy in light of new evidence," she said, her voice carrying the weight of disturbing discoveries. "Initial cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, but advanced toxicology screening tells a different story." She showed me laboratory results that changed everything. Traces of oleander extract, digitalis compounds, and slow-release arsenic. These substances cause gradual heart failure that mimics natural cardiac arrest. Someone was poisoning Robert systematically for months before his death. The forensic pathologist showed me comparison studies from similar cases. "We've identified identical toxin signatures in tissue samples from 3 other suspected victims. The poisoning method was sophisticated, designed to avoid detection during routine autopsy procedures." "Doctor, are we talking about serial murder?" "We're talking about one of the most systematic poisoning cases in state history. 7 victims, identical toxicology profiles, same perpetrator signature. This wasn't crime of passion. This was calculated, premeditated murder for financial gain." Driving home, I realized I'd reached a crossroads that went far beyond business disputes. I could pursue the financial fraud quietly and recover my company, or I could expose a serial killer and help deliver justice for 7 murdered men and their families. Robert's voice echoed in my memory, something he used to say when clients faced difficult ethical decisions. "Edmund, sometimes doing right costs more than doing nothing, but sleeping peacefully is worth every risk." That evening, I called Agent Williams with my decision. "I want to expose everything, not just the business fraud, but the murders, the entire criminal network. These families deserve to know how their loved ones really died." "Edmund, that means becoming the state's primary witness in a capital murder case. Are you prepared for death threats, character assassination, and months of dangerous legal battles?" I looked out at the office building where Robert and I had built our dreams, imagining all those other widows who never got justice for their murdered husbands. "I'm prepared. Let's bring this killer down." What I didn't know was that Vivian had already sensed the walls closing in. Tomorrow would bring her most desperate and dangerous measures yet. Attempts to eliminate witnesses, destroy evidence, and disappear into a new identity before law enforcement could arrest her. But for tonight, I finally understood that this case had grown beyond personal justice. This was about protecting future victims from a predator who'd perfected the art of murder through marriage. The smell of determination mixed with coffee filled my home office as I prepared for the most important investigation of my career. Sometimes one person's courage to stand up can save dozens of others from becoming victims. The war room took shape in my study over the next 3 days. Medical records, financial documents, and forensic reports covered every available surface. While my allies gathered around the desk where I usually analyzed fraud cases, now we were building a murder prosecution. Agent Williams arrived first, carrying digital evidence files that contained 8 years of investigative work across multiple states. "Edmund, we've identified at least 12 potential victims beyond the 7 confirmed murders. This woman has been operating a death network longer than we initially realized." Dr. Harrison looked grim but determined as she spread toxicology reports across my coffee table. Her forensic experience showed as she pointed to chemical signatures that spelled systematic murder. The poisoning methodology was sophisticated, using compounds that metabolize into substances mimicking natural heart failure. Someone trained her in advanced pharmacology. Detective Martinez had the focused intensity of a homicide investigator who'd stumbled onto the case of her career. "Edmund, we've been researching Vivian's background across multiple identities. Your case helped us connect murders in 7 states to the same perpetrator. My attorney, David Morrison, coordinated our legal strategy like a prosecutor preparing for the trial of the century. Here's our approach. We establish the business fraud first to freeze her assets, then present the murder evidence to secure arrests before she can flee the country. The federal investigation was revealing the true scope of Vivian's criminal enterprise. Agent Williams had been tracking financial patterns that connected our local case to a multi-state network of marriage fraud, identity theft, and systematic murder. I found shell companies registered across 12 states, all connected to Vivian's various identities, Williams explained. She's been cycling money through fake businesses to hide murder proceeds, then reinvesting in new identities for targeting her next victims. The smell of fresh printer ink filled my study as we organized evidence packets for the grand jury. Every forged document, every toxicology report, every insurance payout, all documented with forensic precision that would make conviction inevitable. Dr. Harrison proved invaluable for medical testimony. The autopsy evidence shows identical poisoning signatures across 7 victims spanning 8 years. This wasn't random crime. This was systematic murder using a signature methodology. Can you testify to the timeline of poisoning symptoms? David asked. Absolutely. The medical evidence shows a clear progression from initial exposure through systematic organ damage to eventual cardiac arrest. This wasn't accidental poisoning. This was calculated murder. Our investigation revealed the insurance angle that connected all the murders. Vivian had been working with a network of corrupt insurance agents to dramatically increase death benefits shortly before each husband's health declined. Insurance fraud on this scale is a federal crime, Agent Williams noted. If we can prove she orchestrated the policy increases as part of premeditated murder, she's looking at additional decades in federal prison. Detective Martinez coordinated our media strategy, though we had to balance public awareness with protecting the ongoing investigation. We'll time the arrests for maximum impact after we've secured all the evidence. Social media attention will help other potential victims come forward. We scheduled everything like a military operation. Financial asset freezes would prevent her from fleeing with stolen money. Medical examiner reports would establish cause of death in all 7 cases. The business fraud charges would serve as our initial arrests while building the murder case. We need to prepare for her counterattacks, I warned. She's already escalated to document forgery and business sabotage. Cornered serial killers do desperate things. Agent Williams had anticipated this. We've briefed local law enforcement on potential witness intimidation or elimination attempts. Any threats or suspicious activity get reported immediately to the Joint Task Force. The forensic accounting piece came together when Williams brought in specialist Rebecca Torres, a financial investigator who'd worked serial fraud cases involving multiple murder victims. Edmund, I've seen this pattern in 4 other multi-state cases. Systematic marriage targeting, asset manipulation, life insurance fraud, then elimination of the victim. It's like they're following a playbook for profitable murder. How much are we talking about in total financial damages? Conservatively, $3.8 million in stolen assets across 7 murders, plus additional business fraud. If families file wrongful death lawsuits, they could recover both financial losses and punitive damages for deliberate murder. Dr. Harrison's moral courage impressed everyone. Despite facing potential retaliation from a serial killer, she'd committed to testifying about the systematic poisoning evidence. Those men trusted her with their lives, and she murdered them for money. I can't let their families go on thinking their loved ones died naturally. We prepared backup plans for every scenario. If Vivian fled before arrest, we'd already coordinated with international law enforcement. If she tried to destroy more evidence, we'd secured copies with multiple agencies. If she attempted witness intimidation, federal marshals would provide protection. The psychological preparation was crucial for what we expected would be a highly publicized trial. She'll try every manipulation tactic possible, Detective Martinez warned. Playing the grieving widow, claiming you're obsessed with conspiracy theories, suggesting mental illness. Stay focused on forensic evidence and let the science speak. Agent Williams had the best advice for dealing with a serial killer's manipulations. Edmund, remember that everything she says is calculated to create doubt about your credibility. Psychopaths are expert manipulators. Trust the evidence, not the performance. Our final strategy session took place on a Sunday evening with takeout Chinese food and murder evidence competing for space on my dining table. The sound of papers organizing mixed with determined voices as we reviewed our timeline one last time. 2 weeks from Tuesday, Williams announced, coordinated arrests across multiple jurisdictions. Edmund presents business fraud evidence. Medical examiner releases autopsy findings. Media covers the story. Justice gets served for 7 murdered men. And if something goes wrong? I asked. Martinez smiled grimly. Then we've already protected future victims. The evidence is documented. The pattern is exposed. And she can't kill again without law enforcement knowing exactly who to investigate. As my allies packed up their materials and headed home, I stood alone in my study, surrounded by the tools of justice and the weight of representing 7 murdered men who couldn't speak for themselves. Tomorrow, Vivian's desperation would reach lethal levels. But we were ready for anything a serial killer could attempt. The smell of determination and Chinese takeout filled the air as I prepared for the final phase of this battle. 2 weeks of careful execution, leading to one explosive arrest that would expose the most prolific female serial killer in state history. Robert's murder would finally be avenged, and no other man would die for trusting the wrong woman with his heart. Vivian's desperation hit like a biological weapon the morning after our final strategy meeting. I woke up to find my home security system had been bypassed and something had been planted in my coffee maker. The acrid smell of chemical residue mixed with my usual morning routine, creating an atmosphere of immediate danger. But here's where Vivian made her most critical mistake. She didn't know I'd been working with the FBI to anticipate exactly this kind of elimination attempt. My coffee maker had been rigged with detection equipment that would identify any tampering or chemical additives. The hazmat team arrived within 20 minutes of my call, wearing protective suits and carrying equipment that looked like something from a terrorism response. Mr. Blackthorne, we've detected traces of ricin and oleander extract in your coffee system, the lead technician reported. Someone attempted to poison you with the same compounds found in your business partner's autopsy. Agent Williams looked both relieved and furious when she reviewed the evidence. Edmund, this confirms our serial killer profile. When threatened with exposure, she immediately attempts to eliminate witnesses using her signature poison methodology. The attempted murder charge was exactly what we needed for immediate arrest without waiting for the grand jury process. Williams coordinated with local law enforcement to move up our timeline by 48 hours. But Vivian's most brazen move came that afternoon. I returned from the FBI field office to find her sitting in my living room again, this time with a suitcase and what appeared to be a fake passport. "We need to disappear together," she said, like attempted murder was a normal relationship milestone. "I've arranged new identities for both of us. We can start over in Costa Rica where there's no extradition treaty." "Ma'am, you just tried to poison me this morning. I'm calling 911 immediately." "Wait." She pulled out a gun, her hands trembling with the desperation of someone whose entire criminal empire was collapsing. "You don't understand what you've gotten involved in. This is bigger than just business disputes or inheritance issues." The smell of her desperation was overwhelming nervous sweat mixed with too much perfume and the metallic scent of fear. Her voice cracked as she tried to maintain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her abilities. I activated the panic button Agent Williams had given me, knowing federal agents were positioned around my house. "Vivian, put the gun down. You're only making this worse for yourself. I'm trying to save both our lives," she said, backing toward my front door. "The people I work with don't leave loose ends. If you testify against me, they'll kill you anyway." "What people? Who else is involved in the murders?" Her mask slipped completely as sirens wailed in the distance. "You think I developed those poison formulas myself? You think I learned document forgery on YouTube? This is organized, Edmund. I'm just one operator in a network that's been perfecting marriage fraud for decades." The sound of tactical teams surrounding my house filled the air as Vivian realized her escape options had evaporated. "Last chance," she said, pointing the gun at me. "Come with me or die with the others." The others. Robert wasn't my first partner who got too curious about the business model. FBI agents burst through my front door as Vivian made her final desperate mistake. She turned the gun toward the federal agents, giving them clear justification for lethal force if necessary. "Drop your weapon," Agent Williams shouted. "You're surrounded. There's nowhere to run." The gunshot was deafeningly loud in my small living room, but it wasn't fatal. Vivian had been hit in the shoulder by a tactical officer's non-lethal round, designed to incapacitate without killing potential witnesses. As paramedics treated her gunshot wound, she finally broke down completely. "You don't understand," she screamed at me. "I never wanted to kill Robert. But once you're in the network, they don't let you retire. He was asking too many questions about my previous marriages." Agent Williams read her Miranda rights as she was loaded into the ambulance. "Vivian Ashworth, you're under arrest for 7 counts of premeditated murder, attempted murder of a federal witness, insurance fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit organized crime." The confession that followed during her medical treatment would expose a criminal network spanning 12 states and potentially dozens of victims. But that night, I sat on my front porch, watching crime scene investigators process evidence from what had nearly been my own murder scene. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Martinez. "Network arrests happening simultaneously in 7 states. You've helped break up the largest marriage fraud operation in FBI history." Indeed, what began as a simple business dispute had exposed a sophisticated criminal enterprise that murdered wealthy men for inheritance money, then recruited new operators to expand into additional markets. The smell of determination mixed with relief filled the evening air as I realized justice would finally be served not just for Robert, but for dozens of other victims whose deaths had been disguised as natural causes. Tomorrow would bring media attention, trial preparations, and the long process of helping other families understand how their loved ones really died. But tonight, a serial killer was finally in custody, and no other man would die for trusting the wrong woman with his future. The final confrontation was over. The real victory was just beginning. 6 months later, I woke up to something I thought I'd never experience again. The sound of genuine laughter coming from our office reception area. New employees were training on fraud detection techniques, their enthusiasm echoing through the space where Robert and I had once planned to change the world of financial consulting. The transformation still amazed me. My practice, once threatened by a serial killer's greed, had become the region's premier forensic accounting firm specializing in marriage fraud and inheritance crime. Law enforcement agencies from 12 states regularly consulted with us on cases involving systematic spouse elimination and asset theft. Robert's legacy lived on through the Ashworth Foundation for Forensic Justice, which provided free financial investigation services to families suspecting inheritance fraud or suspicious spouse deaths. The foundation had already helped recover $2.3 million in stolen assets and identified 14 additional murder victims across the country. Vivian's legal reckoning had been swift and thorough. Life without parole for 7 counts of premeditated murder, plus additional decades for organized crime and witness tampering. Her confession had exposed a network of 12 operators who'd murdered at least 31 victims over 15 years for inheritance money totaling nearly $8 million. The criminal enterprise had been more sophisticated than anyone imagined. Professional training in chemistry and pharmacology, forged medical licenses, corrupt insurance agents, and a network of accomplices spanning multiple states. They'd created a murder assembly line that targeted successful older men through dating sites and social clubs. But the personal healing mattered more than professional success. Sarah Chun, the FBI forensic psychologist who'd helped profile Vivian's network, had become someone special in my life. Our relationship had grown from shared professional respect into something deeper, built on truth-telling and justice-seeking rather than manipulation and deception. The Robert Ashworth Memorial Lecture Series had become an annual event that drew forensic professionals from across the country. This year's keynote speaker would discuss how ordinary citizens could protect themselves from predatory marriage fraud, turning our tragedy into education that could save other lives. Our impact on legislation still surprised me. The Ashworth Act now required mandatory background checks and waiting periods for life insurance policies exceeding $500,000, making it much harder for serial killers to profit from murdering spouses. Congressional testimony, state investigations, enhanced victim protections, all because one forensic accountant refused to be intimidated by forged documents. The consulting work felt surreal but necessary. Families called from across the country asking for help investigating suspicious spouse deaths. Attorneys sought expertise in marriage fraud cases. And victims shared stories that made Vivian's crimes look almost modest compared to the nationwide scope of inheritance murder. My business cards now read, Edmund Blackthorne, Forensic Accounting and Justice Consulting. A combination that would have sounded impossible before Robert's death changed everything. The work had evolved from detecting financial fraud to preventing murder, from protecting assets to saving lives. Property values in our office building had increased 23% since the high-profile conviction proved that good investigation attracted businesses rather than scaring them away. Young professionals moved into the area specifically because of our reputation for exposing corruption and protecting victims. Trust had been rebuilt through transparency rather than intimidation. Agent Williams, now heading the FBI's marriage fraud task force, stopped by occasionally to share updates. Edmund, 17 additional prosecutions have resulted from evidence your case provided. You started something bigger than you realized. The physical changes completed our transformation from crime scene to center of justice. Vivian's mugshot had been replaced by photos of successful fraud investigations and recovered assets. The smell of determination had replaced the stench of deception, creating an atmosphere where truth-telling flourished and justice felt possible. Standing in our conference room on quiet evenings, I sometimes marveled at the journey from victim to victor. The path had required everything: courage when facing a serial killer, patience during complex investigations, evidence when emotions ran high, and allies when isolation felt safer. But the destination was a practice stronger than before and personal peace built on the knowledge that Robert's death had meaning beyond tragedy. Our work now prevented other families from experiencing the devastating loss of learning their loved one was murdered for money. The upcoming wedding to Sarah filled my spare time with joy instead of investigation strategy. The same conference room where we'd first analyzed Vivian's forged documents would host our reception, with Agent Williams officiating and 200 law enforcement professionals celebrating love built on shared commitment to justice rather than shared trauma. If you're dealing with suspicious inheritance claims or questionable spouse behavior right now, remember this: document everything obsessively. Verify all legal papers independently. And never let anyone convince you that forensic investigation is unnecessary. Your diligence might save not just your assets, but your life. Drop a comment sharing your worst inheritance fraud story. Your experience might help the next person who needs to hear that resistance works and justice is possible when people refuse to be intimidated by criminal manipulation. And where are you watching from? I love seeing how far these justice stories travel and inspire others to stand up against organized crime. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more forensic accounting stories, because next week I'm bringing you something unbelievable. A nonprofit director who embezzled $600,000 from children's cancer research, but forgot the new board treasurer was a retired IRS criminal investigator. That revenge gets served colder than a tax audit, and you won't believe how it ends. From my office in the most honest, forensically sound, and genuinely safe business district in 3 states, this is Edmund Blackthorne reminding you that sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to fight like hell for the living. The sound of justice and learning continues as another generation discovers that detecting fraud and exposing murder require the same essential tools: patience, precision, and the unshakable belief that with enough evidence, every criminal can be caught and every victim can find peace through prosecution. You've been watching Forensic Justice Stories, where entitled criminals get a reality check from professional investigators. If this episode gave you satisfaction or helped you recognize warning signs, hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you're first in line for more weekly fraud exposure and criminal justice content.